Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining me for another edition of Stamp It Out. In this Stamp It Out video, we'll be stamping our best bouquet stamp set. This creates a multi-step floral image, and so I'll be showing you how that goes together in today's video. So first of all, we're going to choose our ink colors. You'll need a color for foliage, which for this bouquet today, we'll be using Forest Moss. We'll be using all Distress Oxide inks for the image today. For the blooms, you'll need 3 colors. I would recommend choosing shades of a similar color. So we're going to be stamping a yellow bouquet. We're going to start with Scattered Straw, and then we'll use some Wild Honey, and then also some Rusty Hinge. You'll also need a dark color, well, preferably dark color, because I think it makes the blooms pop a little more, for the flower centers, and I'll be using a really nice dark brown. This is VersaFine Clair. The color is Pine Cone. So to start off, I have a panel of white cardstock in my MISTI. I have it positioned up in my upper left-hand corner, and we're going to start by stamping the foliage, which is step number 1. I'm just going to go ahead and position that kind of in the center of my panel. If you're die cutting these images, you can definitely stamp first and die cut second, or die cut first and stamp second, whichever is easier for you. This particular image has a lot of guide points, I like to call them, and so it is pretty easy to stamp first, die cut second. The die is nice and open, so you have a really pretty good view of the die. If you want to stamp first, it works pretty well. So I'm going to start by stamping the foliage, and again, this is Forest Moss Distress Oxide ink. I tend to keep my ink pads on the drier side. I like to build up my color with multiple impressions, but if you're using a nice juicy ink pad, you can probably get away with 1 impression, but I'm going to be doing multiples. Again, because I keep my pads on the drier side, I think my images end up being crisper in the end by building up multiple impressions. Rather than 1 kind of over-inked impression, I will build up the color with multiple impressions, and the MISTI is great for that. So our foliage is all stamped. Now we can go ahead and move on to the blooms. I'm actually going to take my panel, and I like to rotate it because for this image, we aligned it up in the upper corner, and so our image is such a far distance from the edge of the paper. I'm going to actually take that panel and I'm going to rotate it so that we're always basing our alignment off of that same edge. Then I'm going to go ahead and take step 2. Step 2 is this bloom cluster. We've got all of the blooms on 1 piece. So I'm going to go ahead and align that. It's pretty easy. You have quite a few alignment points. The leaves all cluster around this image, and it makes it pretty simple. A couple points to look for. I'll zoom in here. Couple good points to look for are these 2 blooms that attach to these 2 stems, these little almost like baby's breath clusters, and then you'll also see the leaves surrounding all of these blooms. So those are some good points to look for. I'll shift this off and you'll kind of see there how those leaves nest around these blooms. Check those 2, check these little baby's breath clusters, and I think we're sitting pretty good right there. Make sure my panel is tight down in the corner before I close my lid. I'm going to stamp these with Scattered Straw, which is a nice, pretty pale yellow. Another thing I like to do is I like to take sponge daubers and smooth out the ink, especially on images like this that are fairly solid. I don't want to have any weird ink pad markings on my ink. So I'll take a dauber and even that out before putting that down. And I'm just going to do probably a couple of impressions. Another thing I really like to do with this image is I'm going to take our next shade darker, which is Wild Honey, and I'm going to use my sponge dauber to just daub around some of the outer edges of these blooms. Just gives it some shading and a really pretty effect. Again, always check and make sure your panel is nested tight down in the corner so that everything is lining up from step to step. Okay, now we're going to move on to step 3, which is the detail for the flowers. And so we're going to take our panel, and once again, I'm going to rotate it so that we're always going off that same edge. Makes alignment just a little bit more consistent. And I'm going to take that. This is all of the details, or most of the details. There are a couple other little third layer details that we'll add separately. This one, again, pretty easy alignment. Points to check for are, again, the base of those little blooms that have the stems up in the top, and then also each of the flower centers. So I'll zoom in and let you get a good look at that. Make sure your flower centers are aligned, and then those little notches at the base of those blooms. Again, make sure it's nice and tight. If you have more than one MISTI, this is a good chance to pull out a second MISTI. If when I do these, when I'm working on projects, I will set up a couple MISTIs, and so that I can leave all of my steps set up, and I can just keep stamping multiples. So you can see here, this is the area where I had the foliage on our first step, but I've pulled that off so that we can do the second step. But if I'm setting these up at home just for doing projects, I would pull out a second MISTI and set up all of the steps so that I can just kind of keep going. I want a little more color on that step, so I'm going to take my rusty hinge and just add a little bit more color using some sponge daubers. All right, we have a couple more steps to finish this off. For these two blooms here and this kind of sideways bloom, there are some third layer details for those, and those are super simple to stamp with just an acrylic block, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is for this larger flower. It gets aligned right there. I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that with a block. It has a nice little point right here, which that aligns right in between those petals. And then there's a similar shading for this cluster of 2 up here. And again, those are pretty simple to align. So again, I'm just going to use a clear block for those. And last but not least, we have the little flower centers that go inside each of those blooms. These are super tiny. You might find it easier to just do these with a pen, but they're in the set in case you want them. I'll just kind of demonstrate maybe both methods. If you want to stamp, I have a dark brown ink here. You can go ahead and stamp that. If you prefer to just simply color those in, I can use a brown pen as well and just add some color just with a pen. Super simple and easy, but they are in the set if you'd like to stamp them. To finish off our bouquet, one of the things I love to do that's super easy and just adds a really fun detail is I like to add some dotting using a brown pen, or you could do this with a white pen as well, and just add some dots and pretty little details to those blooms as well. Totally optional, but super simple to do. There is our finished bouquet. As I mentioned, there is a coordinating die if you want to cut this out. This die is called the Best Bouquet Base Die, and it cuts the whole floral cluster in one go. And I'll just show you that here. So it's super easy to line that up. You have a nice view of the stamped image through the die, and This is the resulting cut. So super pretty, and one of my favorite products from our new release, which is coming to the shop on Friday, April 25th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So that concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing the best bouquet stamped out, and I hope you love stamping with it too, and playing around with all the different fun color combinations you can do with this set. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you soon.